Welcome to the Daybreak with Jeff Slakey podcast. I'm so happy you found us. Please subscribe, rate, review, and share this with your circle of influence. It's a collection of the interviews, news, and conversation during Daybreak with Jeff Slakey on I-Fiber1 News Radio, KMAS, weekdays from 6 to 9. Hey, good morning to you. It's Election Day. And Spencer, good morning, bud. How you doing?
Hey, I'm doing okay. How about yourself?
I'm doing well. It's also my stepmom's birthday today, so happy birthday to her.
Yeah, happy birthday.
Not pretty good here. I guess we're going to gather our immediate family as best we can and have some chili and start to find out what's going on with some of the returns later tonight. It is Election Day. We'll talk about that this morning. Also, Mason County Sheriff Casey Salisbury on for the Sheriff Sit Down presented by our Community Credit Union, and we'll talk about election with him as well when it comes to any type of additional security or officers on patrol in downtown near the auditor's office, things like that. Mason County Public Health notified of 6 additional Mason County residents testing positive for COVID-19. That brings the total to 585 positive cases in the county. Spencer, before we talk about the big day today where across the country people will be standing outside to place their ballots in there with in-person voting across most of the U.S. If that were to happen today, what would the weather be like?
Well, we've got rain and about 100% chance today, and actually about a half an inch total from start to finish today. So cloudy with periods of rain, and same for tonight as well. So it's going to be a wet election day.
So, we vote by mail here, but even if we hadn't voted by mail, I'm seeing these pictures of these huge lines of people. And they're all 6 feet, so you're really standing outside. And some of those adverse conditions, Minnesota, the upper Midwest, it is cold.
Oh, yeah. Boy, you see these lines just stretching on and on and on. And it kind of reminds you, when you can, it's just like paying your taxes. I remember memories as a kid of seeing people lined up at the post office, and I didn't understand what it was. And my father would say, that's because they have to pay. Those people are the ones who have to pay the government money, and they're waiting till the last second to get in. And it's our nature to do that. I mean, we've had such a long time to get these ballots in, and there's still congestion, meaning everybody waits till the last second still. As many as early voters as we have, there's still a lot that wait till the very, very last minute.
Well, speaking of that, it looks as though as of last night, nearly 73% of the state's more than 4.8 million registered voters had already returned their ballot compared to 4 years ago when just about 52%. So you still have time to return your ballot by mail with an Election Day postmark or dropped off at one of the more than 500 drop boxes or voting centers around the state by 8 p.m. So then going back to the visuals you see of people standing in huge long lines for 11 hours. And we have the luxury here in the great state to sit. Whether or not you have a kitchen table or not, you have at least an opportunity to sit there and look at your ballot and not be rushed or not be waiting 11 hours. So it'd be great if we could get that up to 90% turnout, 95% turnout by the end of tonight, compared to what other folks across the country have to do.
Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of a distant memory of going into a polling place and you got the little curtain on either side and, you feel like someone's waiting for you to finish. And I mean, there's something to be said about just kind of taking your time and not feeling rushed through any of the issues. Some pretty big ones.
Well, I have memories of, like going into the ballot booth with my dad and mom and dad and looking at the ballots, but you couldn't talk about things. I mean, it's a secret, right? You could, I guess, a little, but now everybody can sit around if you wish, talk about it at the dinner table and weigh the pros and cons and have flush out a really good conversation.
Yeah, it's definitely very, very different than the way Americans voted years ago, and it's probably going to change even more in the years to come. We've got some pretty big ones, obviously the presidential election, but here in Washington as well. Governor Inslee's attempt to win a third term in an effort to repeal a statewide sex education requirement for public schools topped Washington state's general election ballot. Governor Inslee is seeking a third term, something the state hasn't seen an incumbent governor do in more than 40 years. He faces Republican Lauren Culp, police chief of the small town of Republic, in today's election.
Americans preparing, of course, for what could be prolonged periods of uncertainty after the polls close. Here's Eric Tegedoff with more on how to combat misinformation during these next couple of days.
Americans are preparing for a prolonged period of uncertainty after the polls close today. Experts expect it could take days or weeks to determine who has won the presidential race, as well as other races down the ballot. Michael Caulfield, director of Blended and Networked Learning at Washington State University, Vancouver, co-authored an analysis of what to expect on election night and the days after with his colleagues at the University of Washington and Stanford.
When people face uncertainty, they go out and they try to find information. And if there's not enough information out there that meets that need from reliable sources, sometimes they fall prey to these less reliable sources that are out there trying to spin it, trying to frame it.
Caulfield says it will be important for journalists not to amplify premature declarations of victory. He stresses that uncertainty does not mean illegitimacy. Caulfield says some reports on social media tonight and in the coming days are meant to outrage people and will lack important context. He says there are effective and ineffective ways to push back on these stories.
A lot of people think that fighting misinformation online has to look like arguing. With someone posts something and you have an argument. And really, that's one of the least effective ways to deal with misinformation online.
To better counteract misinformation, Caulfield suggests amplifying insights from experts who study elections closely.
You should be seeking out people that didn't come to this particular subject a year ago, 2 years ago, or 3 months ago. You should be seeking out people that have a real depth of expertise in this and are really staking their reputation on getting it right.
For Washington News Service, I'm Eric Tegedoff.
Thanks, Eric. And again, we'll have full coverage of the election here on the radio starting at 4 o'clock. And you still have times to get that ballot into one of the drop boxes around the area.
The city of Shelton is pleased to announce the selection of Carol Beeson as the next chief of the Shelton Police Department. Beeson currently serves as lieutenant with the San Diego Police Department, where she has worked since 1995. She's risen through the ranks of the San Diego PD, beginning her career as an officer and advancing through the ranks to lieutenant in 2015. As lieutenant, Beeson leads the Sex Crimes Unit, Child Abuse Unit, Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force, and the Sex Registrant Unit. As lieutenant, Beeson also served with the department's homeless outreach team for 22 months, a team comprised of officers, mental health professionals, and social workers. The team's goals are to build trust, provide education, and assist individuals experiencing homelessness with accessing available resources. Beeson will begin her position in Shelton on January 11th of 2021.
And on Thursday, Shelton City Manager Jeff Knighton will be on to talk a little bit more about this announcement, as well as just the overall process and how it worked out with COVID. Pete Carroll and the Seahawks have found and have some fondness for what happened in Week 8. That big win, 37-27 over divisional rival San Francisco, may or may not play a major role in what happens moving forward for Seattle, but the message that came through is something that he hopes can be taken forward. No matter how many injuries or starters are missing, the Hawks can still find a way to be successful. They play the Buffalo Bills on Sunday with an 8 o'clock pregame and a 10 o'clock kickoff. Day before that, this upcoming Saturday here on the radio, the start of the WSU Cougar football season. It's a shortened one. They are at Oregon State this Saturday. So the schedule is as follows: Oregon State, Oregon, Stanford, then the traditional Apple Cup, but that's in the middle of the season now. They're going to play USC, California in December, and then the Pac-12 championship is going to be on either the 18th or the 19th. Of course, this is all up in the air based on the coronavirus and transmission rates and cases, but that's what the plan is this Saturday. Have a little Cougar football before we start off our Seahawk coverage here on the radio. Coming up this morning, Mason County Sheriff Casey Salisbury. Lots of election talk as it's a big day and more coming up. It's Daybreak. Good morning to you.
From the iFiber One News Radio studios, you're listening to Daybreak.
And good morning to you. Time for the Sheriff Sit Down, presented by our great friends at Our Community Credit Union. Mason County Sheriff Casey Salisbury. How you doing, Casey?
Good morning.
It's Election Day.
It sure is.
And while some of the results here in the great state of Washington may not be as tight as elsewhere across the country, there's been a lot of talk this year about the election and people coming to the vote centers and things like that. Is the sheriff's office and the auditor's office in communication about anything for today?
Oh, sure. With all the things that are going on, there's, you can't turn on a news channel without it's all about election.
Yeah.
And, people voice their concerns back and forth. And we've chatted with Mr. McGuire, Patty McGuire, a couple times back and forth about, the election night and everything like that. It appears to me by the numbers that a large percentage of our county's already voted.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't expect, we've been on the mail-in this state for a long time now, and it seems to have been working quite well. Other states, a little bit different, so those polling lines might be longer, but I'm not so sure that we'll have a mass of people show up, just because most people, it appears by the numbers, that have already got their ballots in.
Do you or have you been sent out any messages from the State Patrol or any other sheriffs that you know about just being aware of election night and how to handle that?
Well, I think what we focused on more than anything in talking with Mr. McGuire and also, Chief Moody, because the center of attention is downtown there, is that just the idea, the awareness of what's going on. And the other thing is that during the course of the last, since the time the voting boxes have been, the boxes, receptacle boxes have been available, Mr. McGuire gave us a list so that all the deputies know exactly where they're at, and so that if they're in that area, during the last couple of weeks driving around, just know to keep an eye on that on the ballot boxes as returns come in. But I know that it was their goal or their intention to empty those quite often.
Yeah.
Anyway, so. I think they've got that taken care of.
It was and has been cold the last couple mornings. The fog has rolled in.
Yes.
It was tough driving in at times, and we're starting to see that here in November.
I know. And I noticed this morning coming down the hill, which is probably one of the neatest places when you come down by the log monument and look up and you can see the Olympics, that the leaves were really gold this morning.
Yeah.
And there's been a big change coming down the hill. So, and then also the daylight savings time issue. It looks different this morning, but I think this evening is when it's going to really look a lot different for us.
Yeah, for sure.
And again, there's another one of those things. We always cautious on driving because it's a big part of what we do. But those hours of darkness, it's going to be dark earlier, where there's still going to be people moving about, and it just be mindful with people on the side of the road and just the darkness.
Mason County Sheriff Casey Salisbury here today on Election Day, and thanks for coming on.
Best part about the election is not having to be in it this year.
There you go.
You're listening to Daybreak on iFiber1 News Radio.
Again, Tuesday, Election Day. If you haven't yet, please get those ballots in and vote. Spencer, good morning. How are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. What's going on today, other than the big election day? I guess that's it.
Well, today, it's a election day. The other things that are happening on the day, it's a sandwich day, and who doesn't love a good sandwich?
Mm-hmm. Pastrami, please.
That's your favorite, pastrami? I'm a big fan of just a nice big turkey sandwich with some mayo, lettuce, and cheese on there.
That's always a good one. BLT.
BLT, of course. With the election going on, there's lots of bologna sandwiches happening.
Yeah, exactly. They're sold out.
They're all sold out of bologna sandwiches. Come back in 4 years.
There's a run.
So a run on them, a run on bologna. It was the first presidential election I voted in was 2000. I had missed the 96 one. I remember that Bill Clinton did like a train tour, stopped in Centralia, and I believe a group of us skipped school and drove down there and didn't get very close to, we may have even left before Clinton started talking because we had something else to do. I'm not sure, but then it wasn't until 2000, I was living in Bellingham, that happened. What about you? Do you remember that?
Oh, boy. I remember that, yes. And I'm trying to remember the first presidential. It would have been probably George Bush Sr., that election, and I'm blanking out on who all the candidates were and stuff. Was that? I can't even remember.
So
but
that would have been after Reagan?
71, so, yeah. So Reagan, I was, the 80 election, I was only 9 years old. The next one, I was not yet old enough either. So it had to be the George Herbert Walker Bush election. That was probably my first presidential one.
The 92? Where, that was
so,
H.W. and Dukakis, right?
I think so. Boy, that's going back a long way, huh?
Yeah. Well, regardless, it's an exciting time and an important time. You know, you vote, and sometimes your candidate wins, and sometimes your candidate doesn't, but at least you've made your voice heard. I was listening to something yesterday, just thinking back and listening to all the folks that have worked so hard to get the right for us to vote, to be able to sit around our kitchen table now and fill out those ballots before you send it in. There's a lot of bloodshed that has happened for folks to get the right to cast those ballots. And, you know, when there's 11-hour lines across the country and we got the heater turned on and here in the great state, and, you know, we're just one of 5. It's the other thing is weird is we're just one of 5 states that's totally mail-in. A lot more because of the pandemic. But then you just look at what some of the struggles are in some of the other states across the union, and you go, what? Why? This seems so easy. It just seems like a no-brainer for what we do here.
No, it really, really does. And they are making it more streamlined. They are making it easier. And I think the numbers are so high because people are feeling they're reaching a threshold. That might be a topic for another discussion. Just kind of people are feeling kind of maxed out politically, and they feel like they could really make a difference with this vote. I don't know. I've seen in years past where they've still made it easy and the numbers haven't budged. You know what I mean? Like even after a state will do mail-in, it doesn't necessarily result in any more people. And that's always puzzled me because it was such a struggle. And now we want this pat on the head when we vote, and it's just kind of strange to me, the whole thing. Like we're like little kids, like we just did something. We did something monumentally important, don't get me wrong, but I'm old-fashioned. I think it's our civic duty to vote. I don't think we get a pat on the head or a cheeseburger or anything like that because we voted. I think we ought to vote because we have no right to complain if we don't.
Right. That's exactly right. Yeah, it's just really interesting how it all works out, and yeah, you can't really complain whether or not things are going well or not unless you tried your best, and this is what we have. This is it right here where we vote.
Yeah, it's the best. I mean, I think it's the best system on earth, and one of these days maybe they'll think of something else. But in the meantime, I mean, this is pretty good. A lot of countries don't, they have things called dictatorships still, and they don't, they don't really have a choice of who gets in there, and then the person's in there for 50 years and, dictatorial rule and stuff. They don't have, I mean, they'd look at mail-in ballots like, oh my gosh, that's like I died and went to heaven or something.
Yeah, yeah. Well, just make sure that you get it out there. We had a pretty good turnout, like we were reporting this morning in the newscast here, about 73%. It'd be great if we could get that up into the upper 90s. Of the eligible voters in the country, about half of them actually vote. But we are seeing a lot of turnout. The thing you mentioned, people getting burned out and stuff. Last election, it was a real 50-50, basically. We all knew who President Trump was through his time on The Apprentice and things like that. And we knew who Secretary of State Clinton was through her time in government. And since neither was an incumbent, people were like, well, let's see what happens. Let's vote for this person or let's vote for that person. And because there's no real referendum on what they've been doing. Now it's a choice. You've seen what's been happening the last 4 years. And if you like that, you get to continue that. Or if you don't like what's happening the last 4 years, then you get to put the change to it. And that's the real, I think, key that perhaps is bringing a lot of people out. Last time it was flip a coin, basically. And now there's a real, it's a referendum on what's been happening.
Yeah, no, that's
and not just
definitely a way to look
presidential.
at it.
I mean, that's how it is with everybody.
No, absolutely right.
Pretty amazing. Pretty amazing. We'll get those first returns this evening. I think maybe 7. No, so it would be about maybe 5 o'clock, 4 or 5 o'clock our time. And then the Washington returns will be at 8. We'll have updates on the website for you. Yeah, just an exciting day as it's election day, and more Daybreak coming up. Thank you so much for listening to today's Daybreak with Jeff Slakey podcast. Again, I'm so happy and honored you found us and chose to listen. Please subscribe, rate, review, and share this with your circle of influence. It's a collection of some of the interviews, news, and conversation during Daybreak with Jeff Slakey on iFiber One News Radio KMAS, weekdays from 6 to 9. Thank you so much again, and talk with you next time.